She's my sister.
No, you liar!
She's my sister, I swear. She's my sister.
She was already airborne before her brain caught up with her body. That is the only way to describe it. 1 second Neria Johnson was riding an escalator in the middle of a packed Manhattan mall, already 12 minutes late for work, internally rehearsing the apology she would give her manager for the 3rd time that week. The next second she was vaulting over the railing with both hands, dropping 4 feet of empty air, and crashing into a man who hadn't seen her coming. The sound was not elegant. Neither was the landing. They hit the moving escalator steps together, her on top, him catching every edge of the metal stairs on the way down, and the scream that erupted from the surrounding crowd was the kind that only happens when strangers witness something so unexpected, so completely outside the script of a normal Tuesday afternoon, that their bodies produce noise before their minds decide to. Phones appeared. Of course they did. Security guards were already running. And the man beneath Neria, who was wearing what she would later learn was a $12,000 suit, looked up at her with an expression she had never seen on a human face before. It wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was the particular bewilderment of someone who had spent decades being the most powerful person in every room, suddenly flattened on an escalator by a woman in a second-hand blazer. "What," he said very carefully, "are you doing?" "Saving someone," Neria said and pushed off his chest to stand up. But here's where it gets crazy. The girl was already gone. Before we get to the part where Neria's life unravels completely, and it does spectacularly, you need to understand one thing about her. Neria Johnson was 26 years old, 5'7", the youngest of 6 children raised in a house in the Bronx that had too many people and not enough of anything else. She had her mother's stubbornness and her father's build, broad-shouldered, quick-footed, the kind of person who moved through crowds like water finding a gap. She had spent most of her childhood inserting herself between her brothers and every bad thing that came near them. A habit her mother called reckless and her therapist, the one she could only afford for 3 sessions, called hypervigilance. Neria called it being a decent person. She had been doing it her whole life and it had cost her a great deal. It had cost her the military career she trained 3 years for, when her mother got sick and someone had to stay home. It had cost her relationships, when the men in her life grew tired of coming second to strangers. It had cost her 2 previous jobs for reasons similar to why she was now going to be very, very late. She hadn't planned to stop at the mall. She was cutting through it to reach the subway faster. She had been doing well. She was already past the food court, already mentally at her desk, already saved. Then she saw the girl on the opposite escalator. The girl looked about 16. Korean, small-framed, wearing a pale green hoodie slightly too large for her shoulders. The man beside her was tall, dark-suited, and had the posture of someone who had never in his life been asked to wait for anything. He wasn't touching her. He wasn't threatening her in any visible way. They simply rode together, descending while Neria ascended on the parallel track. Nothing about it should have stood out. Except the girl's face. People who are afraid do not always cry. Sometimes they go very still. Sometimes the stillness itself is the signal, the forced neutrality of a person who has decided that any expression at all is dangerous. Neria had worn that face as a child. She knew exactly what it looked like from the outside. Their escalators drew level for maybe 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, the girl turned her head and found Neria's eyes with a precision that made it clear she had been watching her approach. Then, slowly, she brought 4 fingers to her chest and folded them down. The universal silent distress signal. The one used by abuse victims, by people who cannot speak, by anyone trapped in a situation where calling for help out loud is worse than the alternative. She held it for 2 seconds. Then she let her fingertips brush Neria's arm as the escalators began to diverge. That was all. That was enough. Neria did not have a plan. She had never in her life executed a dramatic escalator vault. Her body simply decided and her mind came along for the ride. And that is how she ended up on top of a $12,000 suit, on a moving staircase, while 300 people filmed her from every possible angle. Now subscribe to this channel, hit that button right now, because I promise you, what happens next is going to wreck you in the best possible way. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see you in the comments. Back to the escalator. The man got to his feet with the deliberate slowness of someone deciding, in real time, not to lose his composure. He was, and this registered even through the adrenaline, extraordinarily good-looking in the way that certain men are, where the symmetry of their face becomes almost annoying because it seems unfair. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, blood at the corner of his lip where he'd caught a step on the way down. He dabbed at it with the back of his hand. Looked at his hand. Looked at her. 3 massive men materialized from the crowd. Not security guards. Their suits were too precise, their movement too coordinated. They formed a perimeter without being told. One handed the man a folded cloth for his lip. Another was already scanning exits. The third held out a tablet. Not threateningly. Just held it out. The way someone offers a piece of evidence they've been carrying all morning waiting for exactly this moment. On the screen was a missing person alert. An official one issued through a private legal firm. The photograph was clear. It was the girl in the green hoodie. Neria's stomach did something she didn't have a word for. Her name, the man said quietly, is Kim Bu-in. She is my younger sister. She is 17 years old. She has been missing for 3 months. He paused. And you just helped her escape. The crowd noise continued around them. Phones were still recording. But the space between Neria and this man had gone very, very quiet. She stopped. My name is Kim Bu-yun. He adjusted his cuffs, which had been knocked sideways. You may have heard of me. She had. That was the terrible part. She had heard of him. The business press called him the Prince of Seoul, youngest CEO to take a Korean tech conglomerate to $1 trillion valuation, a man whose name appeared on the front page of the Financial Times with the kind of frequency that usually belonged to entire governments. She had read a profile of him once while waiting at a clinic and spent 15 minutes thinking someone must have exaggerated his face for the photograph. They had not exaggerated. I didn't know, she said. She gave me the signal. The domestic abuse signal. I know, he said. And something shifted in his expression then, not softened exactly but adjusted. Like he was recalibrating something. She has done it before. The security guards from the mall arrived. Bu-yun spoke to them in a low voice and they stepped back without argument. The kind of authority that doesn't raise its volume because it has never needed to. Then he turned back to Neria. You could be charged, he said. Interfering with a lawful search. Assault. She opened her mouth. I won't press charges. She exhaled. But you will find her. The exhale stopped. 48 hours, he said. You helped her disappear. You can help me find her. If you refuse or if I find out you've helped her further. He left the end of that sentence empty, which was somehow more effective than finishing it. Then he handed her a card. Turned. Left. His bodyguards folded back into formation around him as they walked, and within 30 seconds they had disappeared into the crowd as cleanly as water into sand, and Neria was standing alone on the now stationary escalator with a business card in her hand and the very clear sensation that her life had just made a wrong turn she hadn't approved. She was also still late for work. She thought the escalator was the worst thing that would happen that day. She was wrong. Because when she finally arrived at work, 2 hours late, her manager was waiting at the door. And the look on his face told her everything before he opened his mouth. Batch 2, the unraveling 1,500 words. Her manager's name was Preston, and he was a man who had given Neria Johnson exactly 14 second chances over 18 months. He counted them. He had a list. She knew this because he had shown her the list once on a legal pad with dates. Every time she'd been late, he'd added a line. Every time she explained herself, the elderly man she'd walked to his apartment building, the child she'd waited with until a parent came, the woman whose tire she'd helped change in the rain. He had nodded and added the line anyway. You're a good person, Neria, he said, standing in the doorway of his office with the kind of stillness that precedes very bad news. I know this looks. You are genuinely one of the kindest people I have met in 20 years of managing staff. Preston. But kindness doesn't open the office. She stopped. He looked at the cardboard box he had already placed on the desk. Neatly packed. Her photo from the corner of her monitor, her notebook, her 2 pens. She always used the same 2 pens, and the small succulent she'd named Gerald, which had somehow survived 18 months of fluorescent lighting. I can't keep doing this, he said. I'm sorry. The thing about being fired is that the worst part isn't the moment. It's the 10 seconds after, when the room is still and you have to figure out what expression to wear because there isn't a correct one. Neria picked up the box. She thanked him because that is what she did. She thanked people reflexively even when it made no sense. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. She rode down 22 floors in silence, holding Gerald against her chest, and stepped out into a city that had no idea her morning had gone this way. She sat on the sidewalk outside. Not because she needed to, just because her legs made the decision. But wait, here's the part that nobody tells you about Neria Johnson. She wasn't reckless. She was the opposite. She was the person who had held everything together for so long for so many people that she had never learned to stop. Stopping felt dangerous. Stopping meant the world might actually fall apart without her hands inside it. So she never stopped. She only got tired in the quiet moments, in between everything, in the spaces where nobody was watching and nobody needed anything. This was one of those spaces. She sat with Gerald on her lap and watched a pigeon eat something unidentifiable near a trash can, and thought about what her mother would have said. Her mother had a gift for the specific sort of wisdom that made you feel both seen and lightly insulted at the same time. She would have said something like, "Baby, the world is not your project." And then she would have made tea and said nothing else, and somehow that would have been enough. Her mother had been gone 4 years. The tea was still the only thing she missed that she couldn't replace. Stella's diner was on 149th Street, wedged between a phone repair shop and a laundromat, and it smelled permanently of butter and burnt coffee in a way that should have been unpleasant and was instead the most comforting smell Neria knew. Stella herself was 43, Trinidadian, and had the unnerving ability to know what someone needed before they sat down. She put a plate in front of Neria without asking, and then she sat across from her and listened with her whole body, leaning forward, elbows on the table, while Neria told her everything. The escalator. The girl. The billionaire. Preston. The box. Gerald. Stella listened without interrupting, which was rare. When Neria finished, Stella's eyes moved to the window. What did she look like? She asked. Green hoodie. Small. Korean. About 16 or 17. Something happened on Stella's face. 17? She said. Around that. Stella stood up, walked behind the counter, came back with her laptop and turned it to face Neria. On the screen was the cafe's point-of-sale system, and beside it, a repair log. Someone had fixed it that afternoon. The timestamp said 3:47 p.m. The notes read, "Unknown customer, resolve payment system crash, would not accept payment for service." She sat right there, Stella said, pointing to the stool at the end of the counter. No money, no phone, barely talked. I gave her rice and chicken. She ate like she hadn't eaten since yesterday. Pause. Then my register crashed. It does that, you know how it does? And before I could even call the guy from the repair shop, she had opened the laptop, done something I didn't understand for about 3 minutes, and the whole thing was back online. Neria stared at the screen. And then? She left. When? Maybe 30 minutes ago. Neria was already standing. She found her in an alley off Cortlandt Avenue. Bowen was sitting against a wall behind a dumpster with her knees pulled to her chest and a burner phone in her hand. Screen cracked, battery at 4%, and she ran the moment she saw Neria. She was fast. She was surprisingly fast for someone who'd eaten a single meal in 2 days, cutting through foot traffic with the unpredictable trajectory of someone who knew she was being followed and used it. Neria was faster. Not by much, but enough. She caught her by the sleeve at the mouth of a narrow alley, and Bowen twisted, pulled, made a sound that was half frustration and half something rawer, and Neria held on because she had grown up with 5 brothers and she knew exactly how to maintain a grip on someone who was trying very hard to get free. Stop, Neria said. I'm not handing you over. Stop. Bowen stopped. They stood there breathing hard, looking at each other. The girl's eyes were extraordinary, enormous, dark, red-rimmed from exhaustion or crying or both, and up close she looked even younger than she had on the escalator. She looked like someone who had been carrying something much heavier than her frame was built for and had gotten used to the weight in a way that was starting to bend her. My life, Neria said, is ruined because of you. I lost my job. I have 48 hours to find you before a billionaire does something I don't want to think about. So before anything else happens, you are going to tell me why. Bowen said nothing. You're clearly not stupid, Neria continued. You fixed a commercial payment system in 3 minutes. You've been missing for 3 months and you haven't been caught. You're not stupid. So explain it to me like I'm not stupid either. Something in the girl's posture shifted. Not much. Just slightly. I helped build the framework, Bowen said. Her English was precise, accented, practiced. The AI security framework they say I stole. I wrote 40% of the base code. When I turned 15. When my brother thought I was doing homework. Neria waited. They were going to patent it without my name. They were going to sell it without my name. I am not even legally an adult and they were going to make $1 billion from something I built and give me. She stopped. Swallowed. A gift card. Neria stared at her. A gift card. To a stationery store. The silence that followed had texture. Okay, Neria said slowly. I understand why you're angry. Buin's chin lifted. But you're sleeping behind dumpsters in New York. The chin stayed up but something in the eyes didn't. For all of that genius, Neria said, not cruelly, just directly, the way her mother used to, you're still 17 and alone and hungry. That's not freedom. That's just being outside. And that was the sentence that broke her. Not loudly. Buin didn't crumble or cry dramatically. She simply looked away toward the far end of the alley, and her jaw worked silently like she was searching for a counterargument and couldn't find one. Because she was brilliant. And brilliant people are the worst at accepting the truths they already know. You don't know what my family is like. You're right, Neria said. I don't. But I know what an alley behind a laundromat is like. And I know the difference between a plan and a place to hide. She crouched down to Buin's level, not looming, just even. Why tech? Why this specific thing? Buin was quiet for a moment. Long enough that a bus passed at the end of the street, its lights sweeping briefly through the alley mouth and then gone. My father built the company, she said. He gave everything to it. Then he got sick and Buyan took over and now the company is Buyan and Buyan is the company and I am the little sister. The one who needs protecting. The one whose future is already decided. The word decided landed with specific weight. I don't want a future that someone else decided for me. I want to build something. Something that starts with me and ends with me and doesn't need anyone's permission. Neria held that for a moment. She thought about a military recruitment office in the Bronx 3 years ago, a folder of test scores that made the officer across the desk look up twice. She thought about what it felt like to have a clear direction and the specific cruelty of being told your own body had a vote and had voted no. That's not that different, she said quietly, from why I wanted to join the military. Buin looked at her. I tested well, Neria said. Scored near the top. Passed everything physical. Final medical review found a heart condition I didn't know existed, congenital, manageable, except in extreme combat conditions which are, in the military, not that uncommon. She shrugged, the practiced shrug of someone who has worked very hard to make peace with something. So I didn't go. Buin studied her. What did you do instead? Lots of things. Some of them made sense. Neria stood back up. None of them involved crouching behind a laundromat at 9 p.m. Headlights appeared at the end of the alley. Then 2 more sets. 3 black cars, moving slowly and with the complete confidence of vehicles that did not need to hurry because everything had already been arranged. Kim Bu-yun stepped out of the center one. He didn't rush. He looked at his sister across the alley's length and something moved through his face. Relief and anger and relief again, the two cycling through each other until he apparently decided neither was appropriate for a public alley and settled his expression back to neutral. Then he looked at Neria. She stood up straight and met it. I said 48 hours, he said. It's been 9. He looked at his sister again. Something private crossed between them, the specific frequency of siblings who have had the same fight enough times that they don't need to have all of it out loud. He said something in Korean, quiet. Buin said something back. He responded. She looked away. His men moved to collect her. She went without arguing, though she gave Neria one long look over her shoulder on the way, the kind that meant something she hadn't figured out how to package yet. Bu-yun turned to go. Wait. Neria stepped forward. I'm unemployed. As of 4 hours ago. Because of today. Because I jumped a mall escalator based on your sister's hand signal, which, to be clear, she deployed in a public space without warning, and I responded in the only reasonable way a person could. She held her ground. I think that's worth something. And when Bu-yun turned to leave, when he should have said something, anything, he said the words that would stay with Neria long after she stopped being angry about them. That sounds like a consequence of your own choices. He said it without turning around. Without breaking stride. with the particular cruelty of someone who has spent so long managing large-scale problems that small-scale human pain has become administrative. Neria stood in the street and watched the SUVs disappear and said nothing, because there was nothing to say to someone who was already gone. She went home and cried. Not the performative kind, not the kind you do because someone is watching. The kind that happens alone in a bathroom with the shower running so nobody hears it even though there was nobody to hear it. The kind that leaves you feeling scraped and strangely lighter, like something that had been lodged was finally dislodged. She cried for the job. For the years she had poured into a city that had not poured back. For her brothers who hadn't called in months. For her mother, 4 years in the ground and still somehow the only person whose voice she heard when things went wrong. She cried for Boo-in because she was 17 and sleeping behind dumpsters and had called her own genius worthless through a gift card. She even briefly, humiliatingly, cried about Gerald, because the succulent had survived 18 months and now she had no windowsill to put it on. Then she stopped, washed her face, made coffee, opened her laptop, and there she was, herself, on every single platform. The escalator video had reached 4 million views by midnight. By morning it would have 11. Someone had titled it "Woman Body Slams Korean Billionaire To Save Girl," and the comment section was a war between people calling her a hero, people calling her deranged, people speculating about whether Boo-yeon was single, and one single comment from an account with no profile picture that said, "She let the wrong person go." Neria stared at that comment for a long time. Her brothers called the next morning. All 5 of them. Not in a group chat, individually, one after another in the space of 40 minutes like a relay of bad timing. Her oldest brother, Tobias, called first. He was 34, a contractor in Atlanta, and he delivered opinions with the confidence of a man who had never once been wrong about anything in his own memory. "You made us look crazy," he said. Neria held the phone away from her face for a moment. "Good morning to you too, Tobias. People from the old neighborhood are sending me the video. People from church are sending Mama's friends the video. Do you know how this looks? It looks like I was trying to help someone. It looks like you don't think before you act. It looks like you never grew up." Her second brother, Raphael, said she needed therapy. Her third, Clement, laughed and said at least she was famous now. Her fourth, Idris, was mostly quiet and then said carefully, gently, "You okay, Ree?" Which was the one question that almost got her. Almost. It was the 5th call that finished it. Her youngest brother, Kofi, 29, who she had once taken a beating for when they were children, who she had stood in front of so many times she still felt the ghost of it in her shoulders, said, "You always find drama. Everywhere you go." She was quiet for so long that he said, "Hello," twice. Then she said very quietly, "I spent my entire childhood keeping you safe. All of you. Do you remember that? Because I remember it. I remember every single time." Silence. "Where were you when I needed someone?" she said. "Any of you. Just once." More silence. She hung up. Then she sat very still and thought about the fact that the people she had protected her whole life had watched a video of her and felt embarrassed. She thought about that for a long time. The international call came 3 days later. Unknown number, South Korean country code, 11 in the morning. She almost didn't answer. "I have a job for you." Kim Boo-yeon's voice was exactly the same on a phone as in person. Measured, toneless in the way that very controlled people are toneless, like warmth is something they budget. "You have got to be kidding me." "I'm not. You called me a consequence." Pause. The first hesitation she'd heard from him. "I reviewed the security footage. Your intentions were clear." "Oh great, the footage exonerated me. I feel so much better." Another pause. "I'm offering you a job." "What kind of job could you possibly?" "Bodyguard. In Seoul." She laughed. It was an involuntary sound, short and sharp. "I tackled you." "Yes. That's why you want to hire me?" "Among other reasons." He said it without irony, which somehow made it worse. "You are physically capable. You don't intimidate easily. You act without hesitation. And you are," another pause, this one longer, "difficult to predict." Those last 2 words were not a compliment. They weren't meant to be. She pressed her palm flat against the kitchen table. Through the window she could see the street 3 floors below, pigeons doing their pointless pigeon business, someone's child running ahead of a stroller. She thought about Tobias's voice. "You always find drama." She had 4 months of, and what it looked like from the inside, which was a person who had never once been given the thing she'd spent her entire life giving other people. A chance. How much? She said. He told her. She closed her eyes. I need a week, she said. You have 2 days. Of course she did. She landed in Seoul on a gray Tuesday morning when the city was still deciding between winter and spring, the kind of cold that lives inside your collar rather than against your skin. She'd packed 2 suitcases and Gerald, who had survived the journey with characteristic indifference. The Kim compound was not what she expected. She had expected a mansion in the traditional sense. Grand gates, manicured hedges, the architectural performance of old money. What she found instead was something that felt like it had been designed by someone who wanted a building to answer the question. What if the future looked like it belonged somewhere? Glass and dark stone built into the side of a hill, the structure descending in terraces, every level opening onto garden space that seemed to grow organically from the rock. Artificial water features that didn't look artificial. A security perimeter you couldn't see but could feel, the way you feel watched without being able to find the camera. She stood at the entrance with her suitcases and thought, these people have a different relationship with money than she'd understood money to be. The door opened before she knocked. Kim Bu-yeon's mother was not what she expected either. She expected composure in the corporate sense, the carefully maintained surface of a woman who had hosted state dinners and business negotiations. What she got was a small woman in her mid-50s in a cashmere cardigan, reading glasses pushed up on her head, who looked at Neria with unguarded curiosity and then said, So you're the one who tackled my son? Yes, ma'am. Good. Neria blinked. He needed someone to do it. The older woman smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes and slightly inconveniences the rest of the face. He has been far too comfortable for too long. Come inside. You must be hungry. And just like that, Neria walked into a billionaire's home carrying a succulent named Gerald, wondering if she had made a spectacular mistake or the best decision of her adult life. Probably both. Bu-yeon was not at dinner. He was, according to a staff member who delivered this information with the neutrality of someone who had learned not to editorialize in the South Wing, in a meeting. This meeting, Neria would later learn, had started at 6 a.m. and showed no intention of ending. She ate alone with Mrs. Kim, who asked her about her family in the way that people who genuinely like other people do. Not filling the silence, not performing interest, but actually listening to the answers. Neria found herself telling the woman things she hadn't planned to say. About her mother. About her brothers. About the military. About Gerald, who she placed on the table between them and who Mrs. Kim regarded with great seriousness before declaring him resilient-looking. My son works 18 hours a day, Mrs. Kim said eventually without preamble. He has since his father died. He believes if he stops, something will fall. She looked at her tea. Nothing will fall. But no one has convinced him yet. Neria said nothing. I'm glad you're here, Mrs. Kim said simply. And somewhere in the South Wing, a door opened, and Kim Bu-yeon looked up from a contract and was told that his new bodyguard had arrived. He nodded. Returned to the contract. But he did not, for the next 15 minutes, read a single word of it. The first week was a war of manners. Bu-yeon was exacting in the way that brilliant, controlled people are, not cruel but precise, with the implicit expectation that the world around him would operate at the same standard he held himself to. He woke at 5. He ran 7 kilometers before breakfast. He was on calls by 6:30, often in multiple languages, and he navigated them with the ease of someone who had been doing this so long that the difficulty had become invisible. His schedule was a machine. It did not bend. Neria's job was to stay close and stay quiet. She was not very good at staying quiet. It wasn't that she spoke when she shouldn't. She understood the professional structure of her role, she'd done her research. It was more that her presence was loud in ways she couldn't fully control. She noticed things and her face noticed them before she could stop it. When Bu-yeon's assistant gave him incorrect information, she saw the assistant give it and her expression said something before she did. When a business associate tried to flatter Bu-yeon with a speech that was full of holes, she tilted her head in a way that Bu-yeon, glancing sideways, clocked immediately. You can speak, he said on the 4th day after a meeting with a licensing firm had ended and everyone had left. That's not my job. Your face is already speaking. She looked at him. The numbers he cited for the Singapore contract, she said. The growth projection. He used the same percentage twice for different metrics, One of them was wrong. Bu-yun was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. Then why didn't you correct him? Because I wanted to see if he'd notice. He picked up his phone. He didn't, which tells me something. She thought about that. That's cold, she said. That's business. Those aren't different things? He looked at her over the phone. Something moved in his expression. Not amusement exactly, but its shadow. He went back to his phone without answering, and Neria went back to her post by the door, and neither of them said anything else. But the temperature in the room had changed. Bu-yun was back in the compound and furious about it. She had been installed in the East Wing, which was the nicest section of the building and therefore, from her perspective, the most elaborate cage. She refused to attend family meals. She left her door open just enough to make it clear she was monitoring foot traffic. She had been given back her laptop, restricted, supervised, and she used it with the focused resentment of someone who had been given a smaller version of the thing that was rightfully theirs. She and Neria met properly on a Thursday afternoon by accident. Neria had taken a wrong turn looking for the gym. The compound had 17 rooms she hadn't been in yet, including 3 she'd been told were storage but suspected were not, and she pushed open a door at the end of a corridor and found Bu-yun's secondary space. It wasn't the room she'd been assigned. It was a room she had apparently claimed, because the furniture had been rearranged and every surface was covered with things that looked, collectively, like the insides of a very sophisticated and slightly unhinged mind. Half-assembled circuit boards. 3 laptops at different angles. A whiteboard dense with code and mathematical notation and, in the corner, a small drawing of what appeared to be a robot wearing sunglasses. Neria stood in the doorway and looked at all of it. Then she said, "This room looks like a villain origin story." Bu-yun looked up from a keyboard. She had been so focused she hadn't heard the door. For a fraction of a second, something genuine flickered across her face, startled, caught, then trying to harden back, and then she made an involuntary sound that, against all her visible intentions, was a laugh. It lasted about 1 second. Then she pressed her mouth together. "You're not supposed to be in here," she said. "I got lost." "How do you get lost?" "It's a straight corridor." "I was distracted." Bu-yun looked at the doorway, then at Neria, with the specific suspicion of someone who has decided trust is a structural flaw. "What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I was looking for the gym." "The gym is in the other direction." "I know that now." Neria leaned against the doorframe. "Is that a drone chassis?" Bu-yun's eyes moved to the object in question and back. "Yes." "Did you build it?" "It took 4 days." Neria looked at it with genuine respect. It was compact, elegant, with a modification at the base she didn't recognize. "What does the modification do?" Another involuntary pause. Bu-yun was fighting the instinct to talk about it. Neria could see the fight, and the instinct won slightly. "Stabilizes flight in wind above 35 kilometers per hour. Standard consumer drones fail in those conditions. This doesn't." "How old were you when you started building things?" 9. "What did you build first?" Bu-yun looked at her for a long moment, calculating something. Then, "A device that turned my bedroom lights off from my bed so I didn't have to get up." Reasonable. "It also accidentally turned off the building's elevator." Neria pressed her lips together. "For 6 hours, Bu-yun added. They looked at each other. And that was how it started. "Okay, I need to ask you something. Looking at these 3 people, Neria, Bu-yun, who do you think is the most broken and why? Drop it in the comments." I read every single one. The power went out on a Friday night in the 3rd week. Not the whole compound. The security wing specifically, the section where the primary surveillance systems lived, the servers, the backup generators. It went dark in a sequence that Neria, running through the building, recognized as deliberate. Not a fault. A sequence. Someone had done this. She found Bu-yun in the corridor outside the server room, already on the phone, already issuing instructions in Korean with the clipped deficiency of someone who had protocols for exactly this situation. The emergency lights threw everything into red-tinged shadow. The rest of the staff were in the residential wings. The security team was dealing with what appeared to be a simultaneous perimeter alert that Neria was increasingly sure was a diversion. She stayed close to him. He noticed. The situation resolved in 40 minutes. The perimeter alert was false, the power was restored by the backup team. Someone had hacked the secondary circuit system. No physical breach. A test maybe. Or a message. But in those 40 minutes, while they waited in the security wing with no information and nothing to do but wait, something happened that Neria hadn't planned for. They talked. Not about the outage. Not about the job. About the specific nothing that people talk about when they are in a suspended moment and words start moving of their own accord. Buyun asked her about New York. She told him about the Bronx the way she experienced it, not the way it appeared in think pieces, but the actual texture of it, the sound of it at 3 a.m., the way the bodegas smelled, the particular kindness of strangers on certain blocks. He listened with his full attention, which was not a small thing to receive from a man who managed 10 simultaneous priorities. She asked him about Seoul. He described it differently than she expected, not as a city he owned a piece of, but as a place he'd grown up running through, streets he knew by the sound of them at different hours. Then she said, not planning to, not framing it, just saying it the way truth sometimes arrives. You know what's strange? The stronger people think you are, the less often they ask if you're okay. The emergency lights hummed. Buyun said nothing. But the way his face went very still, not closed, not guarded, but still, the way a person goes still when something they've been carrying silently finally hears its own name said aloud, told her she had said something true. He looked at the floor. Then at her. Nobody has asked me that in about 4 years, he said. It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd heard him say. And in the red-tinted half-dark of a power outage, surrounded by the hum of rebooting servers, something shifted between them that neither of them named. Not yet. It was too new and too surprising and too fragile for names. But it was there. What neither of them knew was that the power outage had not been a test. It had been the first move. The charity gala was Buyun's idea in the way that things are a powerful person's idea when their PR team strongly suggests them. It was held in a venue in Gangnam, an event space made entirely of glass and imported timber, the kind of place that exists to be photographed from every angle simultaneously. Neria wore a dress that Mrs. Kim had selected without asking and left outside her door, a dark blue thing with structure at the shoulders that felt like wearing authority. She did not hate it. She stood 3 steps behind Buyun through the first hour, watching the room the way she had been trained and the way her instincts refined. Not the faces but the movement, not the words but the timing. Who moved toward him because they needed something. Who moved away from him because he'd just noticed them. Who stood too still near the exits. It was at the edge of the second hour that she noticed the vehicle. Just a feeling first. Then something concrete. A black car parked at the wrong angle on the approach road outside the glass wall, headlights off, engine visible from the faint shimmer of exhaust. The driver's door was ajar. She was already moving before the thought fully completed. She came through the crowd fast, caught Buyun by the arm, turned him, "Move now this way," and the car lurched forward, jumped the curb, hit the decorative bollard at the venue entrance instead of the open walkway. The sound was enormous. People scattered. Glass held. Screaming. Neria had taken Buyun sideways into a pillar. She hit her shoulder on the edge of it, the wrong angle, wrong speed, and the pain was immediate and specific, radiating from the joint in a way that meant something had pulled hard. She checked him first. "Are you?" "I'm fine." He was already looking at her shoulder. "You're not." "I'm fine." "You went into concrete." The bollard stopped it. She tested the arm. "I'm fine." He took her face in both hands, not gently, not romantically, with the directness of someone checking for shock, and looked at her. His expression had done something she hadn't seen before. The control was still there, but it had slipped in one specific place like a mask with a loose corner. "Neria." "I'm okay." She managed a straight face. Looked at his wrist. "I think I broke your watch." He stared at her. "You nearly..." He stopped. Pressed his mouth together. "You're apologizing about a watch. It looks expensive." "It is expensive." His hands were still on her face. That is not the relevant point. She would think about this moment later, lying on her back in the compound's medical room while a doctor checked her shoulder, and she would think about the particular quality of the way he'd looked at her. Not the way people looked at her when she'd done something useful. Differently. Like she was something he'd found and hadn't known he was looking for. She would think about it, and then she would try very hard to think about something else. Han Seo arrived 2 days later. She was everything that the phrase family friend implies when used by people with this kind of money, polished in a way that was entirely natural, educated in Europe, working in the company's investment division, and so comfortable in this house that she knew which kitchen drawer held the good scissors without looking. She was also genuinely kind, which was the inconvenient part. Neria had been prepared to dislike someone difficult. Sioa brought Buin books she'd pre-ordered because she remembered what Buin had been reading 3 months ago. She remembered everyone's preferences. She moved through the compound like light through a familiar space. And she looked at Buyun the way people look at things they love and have decided to stop saying so out loud. Neria saw it on the second day. She noted it and filed it as not her business. Then she walked past the study and heard voices inside and slowed, not meaning to, her security habit, logging who was where, and Sioa's voice came clearly through the gap in the door. The wedding announcement is something we have to address. Your mother's friends have started. Neria stopped. She didn't mean to. Her feet made the decision before her understanding of what she was hearing caught up. She stood in the corridor with her hand still slightly raised and heard those 3 words in the specific arrangement they'd come in, and something in her chest did something complicated and fast. She did not stay to hear the rest. She should have. She knew that later. She should have stayed or asked or done any of the 30 rational things available to a person who has heard a fragment of a conversation and knows, intellectually, that fragments are not full sentences. Instead she went to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, looked at Gerald, who was on the windowsill catching the afternoon light with characteristic blankness. I'm an idiot, she told him. Gerald offered no rebuttal. She thought about it with the terrible clarity that comes when you realize you've been feeling something you hadn't admitted you were feeling. She'd been, not hoping exactly, not planning anything. But there was a thing she'd been carrying around in her chest for weeks, some slight warmth in the direction of the south wing and the man in it, and she had been so careful not to name it that she hadn't noticed how much space it had taken up. And of course he had someone. Of course there was a woman who knew which drawer held the good scissors and had been here all along, arranged and inevitable in the way of these things. Of course Neria Johnson, who tackled strangers at malls and cried in bathrooms and named her succulent, was not the answer to any question a man like that was asking. Like and subscribe right now if you felt that, because honestly, same. And tell me in the comments, should Neria have stayed to hear the rest? Tell me. She booked the flight at 11 p.m. She told Mrs. Kim in the morning. The older woman listened without interrupting and then sat with it for a moment. Is it Buyun? She asked. It's time, Neria said. Mrs. Kim looked at her. Not trying to argue, not performing sadness. Just looking, with the particular attention of a woman who has seen a great deal and understands that some things cannot be talked around. You are always welcome here, she said. Neria hugged her. Briefly, firmly. The kind of hug you give someone you mean to have met more to. She said goodbye to Buin through the door of her workshop. Buin opened it, looked at the bag on Neria's shoulder, and her face did something Neria hadn't seen it do before. It went slightly young, which was what it actually was. You're leaving, Buin said. Yeah. Why? It's complicated. That means you're running away. Neria smiled despite herself. Maybe. Buin looked at her feet. Then, you're the only person here who talks to me like I'm a person. The sentence arrived very simply and landed very heavily. That won't stop, Neria said. I'll be reachable. Buin said nothing. But she didn't close the door until Neria had turned the corridor, and Neria heard it close softly, not slammed, not shut with the irritable force Buin applied to most things. Just softly. She did not say goodbye to Buyun. She didn't know how. And she thought, honestly and without self-pity, that he probably wouldn't notice until he needed something covered at the perimeter. She was wrong about that. He was at his desk at noon when his assistant came in to say the new bodyguard had started. Buyun nodded, signed the document in front of him, reached for his phone, a reflex, something to tell, and then stopped. He sat with his phone in his hand for 30 seconds. Then he set it face down on the desk. The south wing was very quiet that afternoon. His assistant, walking past the study at 3, noticed that the contract from the morning was still open on his desk and had not been advanced by a single page. And in a room 4 doors away, Buin pulled up a global flight tracker on one of her screens, watched a plane bank west over the Yellow Sea and started typing. Buin worked fast when she was motivated. And she had never, in her 17 years, been more motivated than she was right now. She had 3 things: a name, a city, and the particular focused fury of a genius who had decided that two spectacularly oblivious adults were not going to be allowed to ruin something she had watched build for weeks. She found Stella's diner in 11 minutes, found Stella's number in 4, and sent a message from a number that traced, if you looked carefully, to a server in Luxembourg that read, "She's coming home. She doesn't know what she heard was wrong. Tell her the truth. I'm handling the rest." The rest was Bouillon. Which was harder because Bouillon had deleted his feelings about this behind 3 layers of professional composure and plausible deniability, and getting through all 3 required both strategy and a complete willingness to embarrass him. Bouillon had no problem with that. She found him at breakfast, the only meal he ate consistently, alone, with a newspaper he read from back to front, and she sat down across from him uninvited, which she knew he hated. He looked up. "No," he said. "I haven't said anything. Your face says it." "My face says you're an idiot," she said pleasantly. "Which is new information. You should be interested." He turned the page of the newspaper. "Neria heard COA mention a wedding announcement," Bouillon said. She left before COA finished the sentence. Which was, for reference, that our mother's friends had been gossiping about a wedding that was never happening and needed to be publicly denied. Bouillon's hand stopped on the newspaper. She thought, he didn't finish? Yes. He set down the paper. Bouillon watched him process this. She had seen her brother manage billion-dollar decisions in real time without losing his expression. Right now his expression was doing something she hadn't seen since they were children, back when he was 19 and their father died and he stood in the hallway of their house holding his car keys for 20 minutes, not going anywhere, just holding them. "It's been 8 days, she said. Nothing from him. She thinks she was foolish," Bouillon continued. "She thinks women like her don't belong in spaces like this. She left because she was protecting herself and she has spent so long protecting other people that she's become very good at protecting herself too, and if you don't go get her, she is going to convince herself this was all professional and she is going to be fine with that because she is used to being fine with things." She paused. "Are you actually fine with that?" The silence that followed was long enough to be its own answer. He stood up. "I need to. I already found her address," Bouillon said. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "Stella's diner. She's been there every morning since she landed." He looked at the paper. Looked at her. "You tracked her." "I have cameras in 43 cities, Bouillon said. "Don't change the subject." "But wait, before he gets on that plane there's something Bouillon has been sitting on for 3 weeks. Something she found in the company's financial records that changes everything. And it's not about Neria at all. It started with an anomaly. 3 weeks earlier, while Bouillon was doing what she was not technically supposed to be doing with her supervised laptop, running background analysis on the company's server logs, she found a transaction thread that didn't belong. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just a series of small financial movements, routed through 3 subsidiary accounts, terminating at a private holding company with no public-facing identity. The kind of trail that someone very careful had laid, expecting it never to be found. Bouillon had found it in 40 minutes. She spent the next 2 weeks following it backward through the company's history, and what she found was not embezzlement, not market manipulation, not the ordinary fraud of someone greedy. It was erasure. Someone had been systematically deleting records from the company's early infrastructure files, specifically from the period when Bouillon was 14 and 15 and building things in her room that she shared with the company network because she hadn't known yet to be careful. Records of her contributions, code commits, development logs, everything that would prove her name belonged on the patent. And at the end of the financial thread, terminating at that holding company, was a name she recognized. Park Sung-min, her brother's mentor, his first business partner, the man who had attended her father's funeral and held Bouillon's shoulder and been a fixture of their lives for 15 years. The man Bouillon trusted with board-level access, with historical records, with the quiet ongoing management of the company's legal framework. Bouillon had sat with this for 3 weeks because she didn't know how to say it. She had tried before, when she was 15 and had seen the early signs of something wrong, and nobody had believed her because she was 15 and rebellious and everyone assumed the problem was her. She had left, which had been a mistake. She knew that now. But she had also, in those 3 months on her own, learned something. Running from the truth doesn't change it. It just gives it more room. She told Neria first. By video call the night before Bu Yun's flight because Bu Yun trusted her in the specific way you trust the person who once told you without cruelty that sleeping behind dumpsters was not freedom. Neria listened to all of it. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" She didn't say, "That's serious." She said, "Send me everything you have. All of it. Tonight." And Bu Yun, for the first time in years, sent her files to someone without fear. Bu Yun landed in New York the next morning. Neria was at Stella's diner when Stella came out of the kitchen and said, with the particular expression of someone who is delivering information and absolutely enjoying it, "There's a man outside." Neria looked up from her coffee. What man? A very good-looking man in a very expensive coat who is standing on the sidewalk like he's never had to wait for anything in his life and has just discovered that he has to wait. Neria went still. Then she stood up. She was going to walk past him and onto the street because she had a whole speech about professionalism and misunderstandings and how she was fine. She was completely fine. She had the speech ready. She'd been refining it since 5 a.m. She walked out the door and saw him, and the speech went entirely away. He looked different. Not disheveled, because Kim Bu Yun did not do disheveled. But slightly outside of his architecture. Like a building that has been perfectly maintained and is nonetheless showing something in the foundation. They looked at each other on the sidewalk. "There was no wedding," he said. She opened her mouth. "There was never a wedding," he said. "COI was addressing a rumor. I would not." He stopped. Tried again. Differently. "You left without saying goodbye. You wouldn't have noticed. I was on the phone for 3 hours the next morning to avoid noticing." She looked at him. "I counted the languages," he added, which was such an unexpectedly specific confession that she almost smiled. "Bu Yun. I find you," he said, "extremely difficult to be around." She blinked. "Because you say exactly what you think. And you treat me like a person who can hear things. And I am very bad at being treated like that, and I have been getting worse at it for approximately 5 weeks. He looked at her. "I walked into a vase last Tuesday." She thought. Bu Yun told him. Of course Bu Yun told him. "I don't do this well," he said. "Any of this. But I would like, if you're willing, to try." The street noise continued around them. A delivery truck went past. Somewhere nearby, a child was arguing with moderate success about something. The city doing its indifferent, beautiful, continuous thing. Neria thought about every person she had given a piece of herself to, and how many of them had stayed. Then she thought about a man standing in front of a refrigerator for 10 minutes, looking at yogurt. "There's something else," she said. Before any of this, Bu Yun found something. About Park Sung-min. His face shifted. "It's big," she said. "And it changes things. And she's been carrying it alone because she didn't think anyone would believe her." Again. The name landed in him visibly. She watched it, the way his jaw changed, the way he went very still in a different way than his professional stillness. "Tell me," he said. So she did. And when she finished, he took out his phone, made one call, and within 48 hours Park Sung-min's access had been suspended, every record recovered, and the original patent filing had been corrected to include the name of the person who had written 40% of the code, a 17-year-old who had done it in a bedroom at night, thinking nobody was watching. The patent listed, Kim Bu Yun. 3 months later, Neria Johnson stood in the garden of the Kim compound, watching the late spring light come through the trees in flat gold lines, and thought about the particular strangeness of how lives arrange themselves. Bu Yun's workshop had been moved to the company's official R&D building, with her own team, her own lab, her own budget. She still called Neria at odd hours with discoveries she wanted to talk through with someone who wouldn't just nod. Mrs. Kim had quietly given Gerald a permanent window in the main sitting room. Nobody discussed this. It simply happened. Bu Yun appeared beside her. No announcement, no sound. He'd always moved like that, which she'd stopped finding unsettling and started finding unreasonably comforting. He stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the same light she was looking at. Bu Yun is presenting her drone stabilization system at the Tech Summit in October, he said. "I know. She called me at 3 a.m. to tell me. She called me at 3:15. She's efficient." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you okay?" She turned to look at him. She thought about all the times she had asked that question and never been asked it back. About the long arithmetic of a life spent giving out and receiving nothing. About a 16-year-old on an escalator who had looked at her across moving stairs and trusted her with a gesture. "Yeah," she said. "And meant it. I actually am." The light moved. The garden held its breath for a moment in the way that beautiful things sometimes do. He took her hand. She let him. And somewhere in the R&D wing, a drone lifted smoothly into the air, stabilized itself in a wind above 35 kilometers per hour, and flew exactly where it was meant to go. That's the end of this story, and I need to know, what was your favorite moment? The escalator? The power outage? Boo sliding that paper across the table? Drop it below and let's talk. And if you stayed until the very last line, you are exactly who this channel is made for. Hit subscribe, hit like, share this with one person who loves a good story. I'll see you in the next one.